to reason. Will you open your eyes?
Okay, so today is Easter, and we're always year-round getting a question, which I think this is an appropriate day to talk about it, which is, did Jesus really exist? Or a lot of them are like, hey, I just watched this awesome movie called Zeitgeist, and did you know that Jesus didn't really exist? They phrase it in one of those ways. And we're not historians. In fact, a lot of the time, people will write in with questions that we have no qualifications to answer, but we do have we do know enough people with qualifications to sort of send them in their direction. One of the things that I think we can't repeat often enough is that Zeitgeist is a shitty movie with terrible, terrible scholarship relying on cranks like Acharya S., who says stuff to the effect, more or less, and I'm probably going to get this wrong and get flooded with emails, but to the effect that Jesus was definitely a deliberate hoax by a bunch of guys who knew exactly what they were doing and set out to scam people. And he was explicitly based on various gods like Mithras, consciously and deliberately. Those people are cranks, pretty much. And if you need to find out more, you can check out, like, I think Zeitgeist Debunked and stuff like that. But there are serious scholars who fall on both sides of this issue, and just this past week, actually, I heard Bart Ehrman being interviewed by National Public Radio, and he was talking about his recent book, which is called, oh no, I don't have it up fast enough, but
I think it's just called something like Jesus historically.
Yeah, well, I think it was just something like, was Jesus real?
Yeah.
And I thought I had it up in a tab already, but I don't. But I'm just going to say that Bart Ehrman definitely believes that Jesus was a real figure, and actually goes so far as to mock mythicists, who are the people who don't believe that, who think that Jesus was just made up out of whole cloth deliberately. And he's kind of got a point there, because there are a lot of really bad non-historians going on claiming stuff that they have no justification for. But at the same time, when I listened to his interview, his reasons for definitely believing in it sounded pretty weak to me. And one guy who agrees with me is Richard Carrier.
Richard Carrier, yeah.
Who also has a
gave Ehrman with both barrels on his blog. I tell you, just really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that up, but we have it in the audience. The Carrier's recent book is called Proving History, Bayes' Theorem, and the Quest for the Historical Jesus. And here's a quick Amazon description. Almost all experts agree that the Jesus of the Bible is a composite of myth, legend, and some historical evidence. So what can we know about the real Jesus? For more than 150 years, scholars have attempted to answer this question. Unfortunately, the quest for the historical Jesus has produced as many different images of the original Jesus as the scholars who have studied the subject. The result is a confused mass of disparate opinions with no consensus view of what actually happened at the dawn of Christianity.
And you know, I think the whole thing, I have always thought that this huge debate about was there an actual historical Jesus is, to a very large part, a big red herring, right?
I agree.
Yeah, it's and it really kind of bugs me when I see people in the atheist camp take a position of almost as much of intractable,
certainty,
dogmatic certainty about no, there absolutely was no historical Jesus, no way, no day, not at all.
Right.
Because again, now that becomes, you've just shifted the burden of proof to yourself with that one.
Yeah.
But ultimately, whether or not there was an actual guy, flesh and blood dude walking around doing Jesus stuff back in the day is irrelevant to the big question, which is, does that fact
make the Bible accurate?
Yeah, prove that a God exists. Does the fact that we could maybe possibly point to an actual historical personage prove that any of the divine or supernatural claims that are made about him in the Gospels true? Just because we may or may not have evidence for historical Jesus doesn't mean we have anything about turning loaves into fishes, or resurrection, or walking on water, or doing any, or appearing to the disciples after his resurrection as another guy, just for some prank or whatever. You know, it's just very, very weird. So it ultimately doesn't matter. There may have been an actual rabbi who inspired the character that was then later largely mythologized and fictionalized in various gospels down the centuries, which happens, or not. But it still does. I mean, if we had a frickin', you know, like Jesus's handprint in graffiti on a wall or something, that proves nothing in terms of Son of God claims.
Right, or
nothing.
Or a tomb that says, "Here is Jesus." Brother,
it's an interesting
here's
question.
The James or brother
it
of
is an
Joseph.
interesting question to contemplate.
In fact, I've made
from a historical
point
standpoint
that you have on the blog a couple of times, and I compared Jesus to people like the Big Lebowski or Kramer, who are sort of based on real people. But actually, I came up with a more accessible example. Recently, which I think is what I'm going to be using from now on. You know, there's this new movie coming out called Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter.
Which was a book.
Yeah, it was a book in 2010, and it's being produced, not directed, by Tim Burton. But, you know, it's the kind of project you'd expect Tim Burton to be affiliated with. And so it's like, the question is basically, was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter a real person? The answer is yes, as long as you understand
except for the hunting vampires part.
Yeah, except for the bit where he hunted vampires, because he's definitely based on a guy that we know is a real dude. But all the stuff that he is presumably going to do in the movie for your popcorn entertainment has nothing to do with what the real guy did. And so, so when I hear people like Bart Ehrman and Richard Carrier duking it out, first of all, I'm interested in what they have to say, because both of the guys are legitimate history scholars with like letters after their name.
And Richard Carrier is a huge fan of Ehrman's other books, like Jesus Interrupted and Misquoting Jesus, and says that's excellent. You know, Ehrman is a top scholar in those, but he just disagrees with him on this issue.
Right. And so what I come away with mainly from Richard Carrier's response to Bart Ehrman, and I could read a little bit of it, but I already think I'm treading into some time. So I'm just going to say check out, I'm plugging Richard Carrier's blog, which is at Freethought Blogs, where all the cool atheist blogs are.
It's the cool kids table.
Yep. freethoughtblogs.com/carrier, and somewhere in there, in the recent posts, is a response to Bart Ehrman, which is worth reading, although I gotta say maybe a little dry. But what I get is that the people who say, and who aren't just shilling Christianity, but still say, yeah, Jesus was a real guy, are basically saying there's not enough historical proof to definitely conclude that he wasn't a real guy. And the people who say that he was a mythicist and who aren't Acharya-est or Zeitgeist fans are actually, you know, in order to debunk Jesus, they're saying there wasn't enough historical evidence to solidly prove that there was a Jesus. And I think this is just the thing about history, because there's really not a lot of contemporary stuff about Jesus, and so whether there was a dude named Jesus who inspired the writings of these guys 30 years after he supposedly dies, that may or may not be the case. But Jesus Christ, Vampire Hunter, definitely did not exist. And I think that's all I got to say.